Dear colleagues, good afternoon. We are glad to see everybody who joined into our roundtable cultural cooperation partnership of state museums and private organization during pandemic and beyond this. I think our roundtable is this example of this kind of cooperation, this Zoom format. My name is Anastasia Dolgova. I'm an employee of Kartio Museum. I'll be in a neutral position. So first of all, technical points for our listeners. As we've got two foreign participants, we've got translation available. So on the right hand side of your screen, you can pick the Russian, or you can listen English channel, or you can listen without any translation. Then you'll be listening to the original voice of the person. Shortly, I'll introduce our participants. Mikhail Piotrovsky, it doesn't need an introduction. The General Director of State Hermitage, President of Museum of Russia's Kartio, Director Museum Amos Rex from Finland, who joined you thanks to our partners, Institute of Finland. I'm happy to welcome Joost Schokkenbroek, who is returning this year as Director of Hong Kong Maritime Museum. Sergey Bogatyrev is Deputy Director of Museum of Russian ICOM and Vice President of ICOM Russia. Vladimir Opredelenov, who is dealing with the interesting area in Pushkin Art Museum, and he is Digital Development Deputy Director and deals with the same area for ICOM. Unfortunately, Sergey Bogatyrev is a bit late, so he'll join in a little bit late because he's an important part of our roundtable as a representative one part of our collaboration of Kartio and State Museum of History of St. Petersburg, and Konstantin Viktorovich Likhalat, Director of Museum of Architectural Artistic Ceramics Kartio and Restoration Production Company Palada. So I would like to talk firstly to speak about the cooperation, because cultural cooperation is started not just yesterday, not today, not only during the pandemic, and it's a very relevant topic. So everybody speaks about it, but we don't speak about it very often. So it would be desirable to speak about the cooperation, not just cooperation of private and state museums, but going wider. About speaking about cooperation of state museums and different kind of profile, different kind of type of private organization, and just listen to our participants for them to share the situation and how it changed, the situation changed with their institution during with this new enemy that but on the other hand it brings us to joining in. So maybe it is a boost for finding some new ways of going into the public network and into the internet, and helps to get closer to our audience when the museums are closed. So, Mikhail Boris, please, we give the floor. The floor is yours.
Look.
Mikhail Boris, your microphone is off. Is it okay? Yeah, it's on. Good, thanks. I think that the sphere we are speaking about, the areas, it hasn't changed during the pandemic. I think that generally a lot of things have changed, but in terms of different kinds of museums, because we're just starting developing all kinds of cooperation. But nothing has changed substantially. But museums have changed, and it will change the whole system of visiting museums. It'll going to be better organized. Museums had opportunity to speak about themselves, so to get new museum and not just a number of exhibits that are visited, and museums will receive a new visitor, a new audience that come to the museum to find something new. that the audience will get something new. It'll be some adding to one's knowledge. And I think we can speak about the cooperation of state museums with private museums from this viewpoint. Because new collections, new museums, new collections, and new people, new visitors, and new type of administration. I think everything is new, and that's so we need to actually to employ it and to make it part of our lives, so we'll be able to live without looking back at the COVID. And I think that cooperation is a very important page of our new book that we are starting writing. So it's a very important thing. So good luck with that. Vladimir Viktorovich, maybe you'll speak about how's it going, how the changes are taking place in Moscow. So at large, I would say that there are no big changes, but there's some limitations due to the fact that the collaboration with exhibition projects as international projects or international, the Hermitage is linked to international cooperation, and it's a very relevant topic now, and we need to reconsider things, especially that international exhibition plan is set up for 3-5 years, and due to this, the last year and this year were very complex. And in terms of supporting private institutions, everything is based on the relationships, private relationships, personal relationships, and on trust and preparedness of us and the companies to cooperate. But we can see that big players, they don't leave us. Middle-sized business is getting it more difficult to work, and as it goes globally. And I think that people who support the format of the middle-sized business now are turning to the patrons or to sponsors, personal sponsors, considering it's a new way of support, and that they'll be supporting new projects. So funding in all areas can be going this way. And surely IT impact is great. IT company, all integrators want to join into the project, because museums this year, for the last calendar year, showed a great opportunity of online work. Nobody was expecting that. So great of viewers, tens of millions of viewers and visits. So physically, it was a breakthrough. It was disruption. Pushkin Museum involved about 10 million people were involved. It was impossible before. It's a change in the model, and many IT partners are ready to get involved in this. And it's a big venue for search of new digital opportunities. So this venue that many want to work with. It's a new industry. Vladimir, thank you. The digits are 3,000 events. It's great. So many movie Culture F actually overcome 12 million unique visitors a month. It was impossible before. It's a portal of cultural heritage of Russia, and it's a lot of viewers from visitors from the regions. So Pushkin Museum stop being that is known in Russia and abroad, but 60% of subscribers are people from regions, from different countries, from all of that. And it's great. It goes that we encompassed great area, and we've got new opportunities. Great. Now we would like to listen to how's going the situation for cooperation in Finland. Can we speak about it and your private museum, how you cooperating with a state institution? Have you changed in 2020, any changes or any events? Can you share it with us? So is the Finnish audience the same active as ours?
Well, yeah, the similarities are very big, of course. And speaking about state museums, municipal museums, private museums, they are all, first of all, museums. So the differences are pretty superficial, finally. The year has been difficult, of course, but work goes on, and we have all been planning what is going to happen in the years to come, and everything, of course, is collaboration. And what we have been missing, of course, is the real networking, you know, meeting people. These kinds of meetings are very nice, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you, but how much nicer wouldn't it be to be all physically present in St. Petersburg? But now, of course, we have also learned a lot of things, like, for instance, all this distance working. And then we have been forced to work with digital contents in a way that we may have been planning before the pandemic. And we thought that, yeah, we will do that as soon as we have time, but now we've just had to do it, and I think we have all learned a lot. So as the saying goes, there's nothing so bad that it doesn't bring some good things with it.
С этим, конечно, сложно поспорить.
Yes, we can't argue with it. It's really glad that besides representatives of state museums, our domestic museums, we got representatives of private museums, like Museum of Russian Icon. Sergey can speak about it. Are there new projects, or maybe they stopped some links? So hello, good afternoon to everyone. The last year it changed a lot of things. Last year lapsed a lot of things in the life of museums, and in our museum particularly, in terms of our museum, we have rather urgently and fastly reacted on the demands of museums. And during spring, on the beginning of summer, we recorded a number of online tours, museum tours. It's not in the volume. It's not no way can be compared with the volumes of Pushkin Museum and the Hermitage, but still it was made by the requests of our permanent users and subscribers. Some exhibition plans have been corrected, and the policy that the museum has been conducting, the active development of state and private museum partnership that was outspoken by Vladimir, specific projects are funded. So not the funds go to some foundation, and then this money goes to the events. So now we are in the framework of our partnerships with regional museums. It's an exhibition of one masterpiece. We exhibit icons in Moscow from the stocks or from poorly known main exposition of regional museums, and we speak about the region. We print the catalog, publish the catalog, and we are helping the regional museums. We're planning to carry on with this. We'd like to say a couple about small-sized private museums.
Весь прошлый год Михаил Борисович тоже это подтвердит.
During the entire previous year, and
по реализации возможной помощь.
Professor Piotrovsky will confirm this. There was a lot of work for the support of the private museums. Unfortunately, it wasn't finalized, and many museums are closing at the same time. There was an issue about the identification of museums, and because currently there are many institutions which are more hospitality sector, tourism, facilities, entertainment ones, which refer to themselves as museums. But actually they live by revenues from tourism, and it probably would be not appropriate to consider them as such, as museums, because they do not actually meet the requirements to museums as institutions collecting and running scientific research activities. And at the same time, there are many interesting private collections which have become over time museums of sorts, but due to no flow, lack of the flow of tourists, they cannot maintain themselves as museums. It's one of the disadvantages which affect private museums. And also during the past year, but everybody probably understands the need for broad presence of FCC, of online activities, of planning the activities, and I consider that sooner or later the borders will be open and the tourist flow will resume. And apart from that, we have internal tourism, and we have new visitors, and I also try to pay attention, ourselves being a small-sized museum, we have a different crowd, different type of visitors. Those are the ones who probably before were not very interested in our type of exhibits, because probably they have more free time and maybe free entrance, and maybe they got tired of sitting in closed space and staying in closed space indoors. And I understand that there are measures such as selling tickets, including selling them for different categories, different groups such as artists, Ministry of Culture employees, museum employees, and that actually affects the size of the flows. And we also need to learn to live under the new conditions, have smaller size groups and shorter open times. And but still we also in estates which act countryside estates which act as museums, it's also a problem for them. So the situation has taught us a lot, and we need to continue to operate in this type of a hybrid format, online, to combine, among other things, online and offline activities. And there is more and more presence online from our part. Also, speaking about private museums, it's actually a separate topic, and we will discuss it later. Also, Sergey Kaluzhin has joined us. He is a listener, and I would like our technical team to assist him in for us to be able to hear his voice. And now I would like Joost to maybe for his input, maybe he can share some international experience, and he has survived this terrible year to 2020, in his previous capacity, and now he's fully engaged in the operation of the Hong Kong Maritime Museum. So what kind of changes can you sense now?
Spasibo, Anastasia. It's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon with so many esteemed colleagues in dear and wonderful Russia and Finland. Thank you so much for your invitation. When it comes to the past year, when I was still executive director at the Vancouver Maritime Museum in Canada, the museum was closed for 3 months between March and June. And as Churchill, I believe, said, never waste a good crisis. So what did we do whilst being closed as a museum? I asked my curators to finish the database, so at least our collections would be accessible to our audiences. If they couldn't come to the museum, at least they could get a sense and can still get a sense of our collections. That's one. We also, like so many other dear colleagues, we created virtual presentations, oftentimes in collaboration with other museums and other institutions in Vancouver and Canada. So people could sign up, tune in, pay a fairly modest sum, a few Canadian dollars, to listen to a presentation by one of the experts. We also created 3 new exhibitions while being closed, because we wanted to be able to show our audiences something new the moment we would reopen. And one of these exhibitions actually was turned to the outside. So people could walk around the building while the museum was opened, but could walk around the building if they didn't dare to get to the museum while the museum was made corona-proof, and still enjoy the exhibition that way. And I think that was very much appreciated by our audiences. Dear Mikhail and Sergey as well, you both indicated the change in visitors, in audiences, and that's something that we experienced in Vancouver. Before the pandemic, it was middle-aged guys like me who would come to the museum and enjoy the exhibitions and be critical and occasionally ask questions to curators about what it is that people would see. And these middle-aged guys still come to the museum, but more than ever before, young families with children came over to the museum the moment we reopened, as if they wanted to get away, like Kaya said as well, I believe, like to get away from their apartments somewhere in the city, get out, meet friends again, meet the family again in a safe environment, and talk about beautiful stuff, beautiful exhibitions that they could see. So I think, in a sense, despite all the problems that all of us have experienced and still experience, to me, it was a clear indication that museums, more than ever before, they play a very important role for society, for communities, to bring people together, if we can, either virtually, as we all do now, or ideally, I would say, in person, by creating a safe environment and giving people distraction, if you'd like. Well, I'm talking about the museum that I left 3 weeks ago. I'm in transit. I hope to start in Hong Kong 2 weeks from now. I'm in the Netherlands halfway, but this is what I wanted to share with you as one of the major changes that are taking place. The creativity of staff, developing new products, getting a new demographic, a new audience into the museum. And maybe I should conclude for now, Anastasia, if that's okay with you, by indicating that right from the moment the pandemic started, some 25 organizations in Vancouver, museums, the aquarium, the science center, libraries, theaters, they came together to see how can we communicate and collaborate and find ways to reach out to our audiences that were not dead. We are very much alive. And I think it was a wonderful initiative to, maybe it didn't really materialize materialized yet in very close collaboration, but at least we found a way to listen to each other and talk to each other and share experiences with each other. And I'm sure that the same is happening as we speak in beautiful St. Petersburg or in Helsinki or in Moscow or other places as well. And if not, I can strongly recommend all of you to try to do this, because I think it's useful and it's helpful as well.
Спасибо большое, Joost. Это очень
Thank you very much, Joost.
приятно знать, что мы
It's good to know that we are more or less on the same page and moving in the same direction. And maybe Sergey can also share something about how his museum operates in this new set of conditions. Dear colleagues, yes, it's very gratifying to see everybody, including Professor Piotrovsky, our international colleagues, and we are communicating in this format already for some time. And it's sort of a continuation of this virtual dialogue that has been going on. And it's good that we are able to say a few words about our collaboration and our joint work jointly with Karamark and the Museum of Architectural Ceramics, which we have established jointly, and it has been operating already for some years, and many of our colleagues have visited it, and it's a popular museum among the visitors, and it's hard to speak about a large flow of visitors because due to the pandemic we have been forced to limit the flow, but we are hoping to reach good indicators, good figures once it receives. And speaking about public-private partnerships, putting actually, to be honest, we should really be discussing something along the lines of joint activities, because PPPs are governed by a number of documents, and in order to create a precedent, we need to apply immense efforts by lawyers and other specialists, and we have actually done it differently. We have signed cooperation agreements, and we have leased some parts of our collection for temporary storage, and it's not a very easy tool, because we have actually two facets, because on one hand we have a commercial subdivision, and on the other hand a museum, and the income, there is income which is of no small importance, and it is the museum is receiving it. So there are certain problems, certain obstacles which we try to overcome on a routine basis, and we really do want to work, and Konstantin Likhalat is somebody who understands all the difficulties of our interface, and due to the understanding between ourselves and a desire to cooperate, we have this very successful undertaking, very successful project, which is more based on personal relationship than on some documentary legal basis. And so speaking about PPPs, this is what we are trying to do, but you have actually predicted my question, and we spoke about similar partnerships before, and now I would like to maybe ask Konstantin to immediately overtake the initiative and continue on our part to speak about Karamark and deal with the year 2020. So about the effects of 2020 on our new project, which is only a couple years old, and our successful collaboration with the Museum of the City History has just started. And of course, for us, for somebody who tried to accelerate this project, it wasn't, we didn't anticipate that. We couldn't stop immediately because it was quite stressful for us. And now you can see the first shot, the first slide of the presentation. And of course, the year 2020 was very important, very, how to say, really affected us very much. And when it comes to our exhibit, joint exhibit with the City History Museum, there have been many difficulties, but we had to accept it. We had to take care of the people. Therefore, many showrooms were closed, and it was difficult. However, ourselves being a private museum, and our collective, our team is not very big, we adjust faster and adjust to the circumstances, and we switched quite fast, and we started to reach out to audience in social networks. And when Sergey is forecasting that it is summer and there is an influx of internal tourists, and we can track the new audience which learned about our project, and now we are gradually moving over to our successful case presentation. We are a private museum, a private cultural institution, and the Karamark Museum of Architectural Ceramics has its own stocks. We have auxiliary funds, a scientific library, and the year 2020 has enabled us to focus more on working with our stocks, our storage funds, stored resources, and we have actually issued a number of books under the framework of the series that we are publishing, and we published several issues of the magazine that we are publishing, and we also try to do some outreach and get people involved and help them understand, help the audience understand how they should take care and preserve the architectural ceramics, and thereby to learn about the history of St. Petersburg. And the exhibit and the monarch's bastion of Peter and Paul's Church is something Sergey has mentioned, and thanks to the formula which has been shown in our presentation, plus one more private participant, a production company, it has enabled us to implement that project, another project, quite successfully. And due to that formula, we've been able to move over to a different stage of our relationship. We have been able to involve 12 participant museums to participate in this project and arrange a 500 square meter exhibit. We have done some repair works and arranged some things for our new exhibit. Over 500 exhibits have been presented, and 90% are the restored items, and mostly the stocks of architectural ceramics are from the demolished interiors, and mostly they are of valuable artifacts.
Следующий слайд, пожалуйста.
The next slide, please.
Вот несколько, соответственно,
So there is some holes. And the next slide you can show. So the way the Alex exposition looks for those who can were not lucky to see it, to visit the next the image, the next one.
как уже отмечалось,
So thanks, as Usman mentioned, thanks to the partnership with Palada, 90% of the exhibits have been restored, and it led to involve other museums, because one of the condition of other museums for actually displaying the artifacts from their stocks. There were different state of restorations, and due to this triple union and cooperation, it was possible to restore and display these artifacts, these exhibits at our exhibition. You can see what was the state of the architectural ceramic when it was coming to us, and we had to. So you see the horrible state. It's Zinaida, it's Martyr Zinaida. So we removed it from the building, brought it to the restoration workshops, and restored this ceramic. And now on the right, you can see so on the venue of the exposition, you see this icon is on the display. So the next slide, please. Successful cooperation and organization of exhibitions. One of the joint exhibition with the Hermitage, the adventures of the Dutch tiles, and the project is underway, and this project will start travel as a traveling exhibition and makeshift exhibition. It will be represented it will be displayed in other museums of Russia. The next slide, please. Also, along with the Institute of Finland, it's another collaboration. We conducted an exhibition of Finnish artist Mary. It's on the left, you can say, and it was extended. The exhibition was extended. And we managed to make a wide audience get acquainted with this artist. So with the joint with Shushev and Andrei Rublev Institute, cooperation made possible opening of an interesting exhibition. It's a hunter for the Dutch tiles. And so it was on the venue. So along with the Museum of History of City, managed to open a new exhibition, open new halls for temporary displays. And this actually display was took place here. The next slide. Thanks to the fact that Kermark Museum and private institutions, cultural institutions, cooperation is a private institution. We've got a wider audience than the state museum. So in the inter-museum that we represent our joint project with the Museum of History of the City of St. Petersburg. The next slide. Here is a private museum, private cultural institution. We are speaking about our museum at exhibition of private museums of Russia in Sokolniki, Moscow. So we are expanding our audience, and we are disseminating. It's a different kind of audience, different people who come for different emotions. And so this way we show that our collaboration, our joint experience, I'll reiterate it, actually it spreads the network for a wider, for broader territory. Next slide, please. for 2 years. Within 2 years, we've run 2 international research conferences, and the third one took place in 2020 when some limitations were lifted, and we managed to run it online and offline mode, in online and offline mode, with certain limitations that took place that were imposed on us at that time. The next slide, please. Round table. Architectural museums, roundtable, international experience of our conducting this kind of events. So they touch upon issues which way the architect should be represented in museums that are dedicated for architecture. Very interesting and very topical issue. We've already touched upon this issue. At this point, we started dealing with this long time before, and actually it's floating in the air in the museum, the history of St. Petersburg. It's been considered for a long time, and the museum of architecture as a museum of architecture, but architecture in very specific sense of architecture ceramics. We are speaking about this, and we are disseminating this information, and we're sharing this information that should shortly start existing on the city scale, citywide. Next slide, please. Mass broad-scale events. Leave your mark, leave your footmark. We made this festival Leave Your Footmark. It was only involved a lot of people, but also the involvement of international ceramic artists who came to this festival and made them opportunity to get involved and to present their works. Could you speed up, because I think other museums won't be able to make presentation of their museums. Maybe you wanted to speak about the issues of replication, and our project is very interesting. And very interesting 2020 projects. I'll make it short. Made the second exposition for the expression of the Baroque and neoclassical Renaissance, and we made the facade, the heavenly gardens of the Orthodox Hellas, where we made the ceramic of cathedrals. This specific slide speaks about what Anastasia just talked about. It's about replication. So new participants, absolutely new in terms that they're Orthodox organizations. It's Sunday convent, knowing the ceramics and using the knowledge in ceramics and knowing this museum space, we made a joint museum of the local geography, and it shows that the interest for this project, for this kind of private collaborations, is great currently. So replication of this kind is very topical. The next slide. Our plans. The plans look like this for the future. Now we are running negotiations, and they turn into the final stage. It's exposition, Karamark Viborg Museum Exposition in Viborg Castle, where we display ceramics, and the 2020 we had open collaboration with them, but now it led us to enter such institution in support of entrepreneurship and the organization, the help and support small-sized business. and it became possible to organize that it's actually claimed to make the exhibition of the main towns of the land-grant regions, so they're makeshift exhibitions. And we speak about business planning and now and how to organize this kind of events in big towns.
And how to organize similar events in the large cities of Leningrad Oblast, the region around St. Petersburg. So then in the framework of this presentation, I've tried to share some information about how we survived the year 2020. And this experience of replication, those cooperation patterns, it's interesting how different segments complement each other. And it would be interesting for other museums to share that as well. We have had some preliminary cooperation, and we would also like to ask other museums about
Три основных качества, которые необходимы для того, чтобы вот это сотрудничество действительно было успешным.
Make it more complicated, and maybe it can become more fruitful and help and satisfy all the participants. And so maybe Mikhail Professor Piotrovsky can share the experience of the State Hermitage. His sound is unfortunately off, so we can now resume it. It's three items that I would like to cover. In the first place, the cooperation in what Sergey has tried to touch upon in terms of trying to define what a museum is, whether it has stocks or not, what a private museum is, whether it what we can actually understand as a museum, and what the cooperation between the state and non-state museums should be like. And we actually do cooperate. We have many discussions with the museums which are included in the list of the which is maintained by the Ministry of Culture. And we should also understand that public and private museums are different in the sense that they try to they are more mobile, more flexible, and which the state museums would probably never have. And we are trying to jointly create those patterns which would be not bureaucratic, and we are trying to keep cooperating further. And there are wonderful examples of cooperating in the regulatory guillotine, so to speak, abolition, cancellation of various laws, redundant laws, which and the regulation that exists in this field. And we have, for example, recently come up with a unified set of rules of registration, the museum storage units, the exhibits. So we try to reflect, to take account of all the existing opinions and standpoints. So it's not necessary to what kind of citizenship people have, and we try to work together, and working jointly with Karamark is one of our positive, successful experiences, and we try to cooperate, work together, and we need to understand that it's not so easy. And a private museum has collections, and a private collection always has a destiny of its own. For example, the Hermitage Museum has private collections, and we show the private collections. We try to show the things that pose different questions, and we try to discuss them. We try to, for example, show the prints from Degas sculptures and show the Rubens art from private collections, and we are not afraid of engaging in the discussions. And so, for example, the Fabergé collection that we have, and everyone is actually gets very agitated when we hear the word Fabergé. There are many private collections that hold Fabergé items, but we were actually the first ones who have displayed a very big Fabergé collection. Also, we have shown Vexelberg collection and the Fabergé Museum in St. Petersburg, and they are examples of very good cooperation. And it's a very specific museum, and we also try to cooperate in very delicate fine items. I fully support the claims of the museum to restore the Shuvalov Palace. Of course, there are various questions related to the Fabergé items. We are trying to discuss them within the museum research board, and then there are many discussion of those many delicate issues, and there are new museums, and we try to display. There has been a lot of outcry, and they are very expensive items. But museum items are priceless. They do not have a price. And of course, if it's a Picasso, then you are depriving a person of the right. If he is a holder of a Picasso item, you should not deprive the person of the right to attach some value to it. So we need to. Sometimes private museums are confusing those things, but they do have some shortcomings, some inherent shortcomings. And a museum is different from a store. Still, a private museum is not a store, and it doesn't. The items stored there and do not have a price. An exhibition is not a pre-sale exhibit, and there should be no price tags if it's a museum. And a museum is science and scientific research, so it's important to have the history of an item. And it's good to, for example, if it's an exhibition of Russian items, if you're talking about culture, so we are creating it together, and our tracks, our routes are not very simple ones. It's not always easy solutions. And we need to find those solutions, even though it may be hard, in terms of how to define a museum, how things can be should be shown, and so if you are exhibiting private items, you are should attach the tags to them according to the scientific requirements of the museum, and not to the requirements of the owner. So our relations with the private museums are very tricky, and they help us find out the ways, to sort of streamline and find best solutions based on the expertise that private museums have in terms of their mobility, freedom to use money, and other things. And we have other things. And but if we file all the documents for public-private partnership, it would be very difficult.
So we can join and create something new. So with this kind of experience, so this is a prospect for the future. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Михаил Борисович. Вы очень правильные такие слова сказали, которые очень отзываются в нашей...
So it's great words from Mikhail Borisovich that reverberate in our souls. This is a sort of freedom and wide opportunities that are not regulated within the private museum, along with the opportunities of status museum. They bring to some great projects that were not available to implement separately. Kartio, can you speak about your successful cases of cooperation of state and private museums? So what do you think is important for this cooperation to carry on to be fruitful, please?
Thank you. Well, it is like Professor Piotrovsky says, that the big advantage of private museums is the faster decision making and the flexibility. I could give you an example which is very much from today. The museums in Finland have been closed since November last year because of the COVID situation. For the state and the municipal museums, this was a decision taken by the authorities from which the museums depend. For the private museums, such as Amos Rex, that belongs to a foundation, it was a recommendation that we followed first, of course, in spring, when pretty much the whole country was closed. And then during 2.5 months from November onwards. And we were hoping that the recommendation would be reconsidered, as it is quite possible to open museums for a limited number of people, taking care of all the safety measures. But as there was no progress on this thing, we decided that it was just a recommendation, and we had the liberty to open very carefully last week for a very limited number of people, buying time slots. And it is like Joost said, that the pandemic has also showed how very, very important museums are. It was really, really great to see the joy of the lucky visitors who were able to get those very, very few time slots. Amos Rex is mainly a contemporary art museum, but we sometimes make exceptions in our exhibition program. For the moment, we are showing a really magnificent exhibition of ancient Egypt. And it comes from a museum that is very interesting in the context of our topic today. It comes from the Egyptian Museum in Turin, in northern Italy. And this museum, the museum itself, is a private foundation, but its collection belongs to the Italian state. And this combination works really very well. It's quite seamless. Of course, it demands a little bit of paperwork, but it's this kind of private-public collaboration can be quite fruitful.
Спасибо большое, Кай.
Thank you very much, Kai. We'd like to, as this year brought us to digital area, to hear about Pushkin Art Museum digital project. And I understand that new technology use and the exhibition are scanned and they are presented to general public, and it will give us information whether in the future people will be going to museums or they'll be happy just using these digital projects. So please, Vladimir Victorovich, share this information with us. Thanks, Anastasia. I'll show you. So the presentation of the websites, can you see it well? It's a consensus and memorial flat. I'll show you 3 areas and show footage, virtual Pushkin Museum. And we understood this year that virtual tour of museum is very on a great demand, and there is a hype of it. You can see, and you can actually purchase from the website the virtual tour, and we stopped actually dividing real and virtual visitors. These are just visitors from who just physically came to our museum, or virtually. It's a different approach, because before the attitude was that it's a virtual visitor as a person, as a second-rate person compared to the physical visitor. But this year changed this situation drastically, and it became one of the points of profit. There's individual exhibitions and collaboration with private institutions in terms of this. So all the exhibitions we opened the exhibition from Dürer to Matisse in the museum, but thanks to the support of our partners, we made it in a virtual space. We made a full-scale virtual twin of this exhibition. If you take a look, this can private collection from Kaplan, a private collection exhibition, or my Anatoly Beckerman exhibition. You can visit them, you can take a look and view every exhibit. Isn't it grounding and it confirmed that it's a good way of joint work with a private collection, and this project way of living 1 minute, 100 was to live a minute. So we managed bring together colleagues and curators and specialists. It's a global scale, hundreds of participants from everywhere. Before it was impossible, 1 year and a half. This is a mass media venue with the curators and artists. They presented their projects and voiced, could outspokenly speak about their project. It's a virtual platform for communication with modern artists, a small size. Size footage related, video related. Can you see it?
It's an online project
of Pushkin Museum. You can see what took place and what I showed you. Everything is available for personal free visit, and it's an issue of collaboration. This platform has been developed by Museum Plus company that provides it free to us. It's an integrate international easy travel service, and we use the guides that are used there. And digitalizations of this exhibition, also partnership support. As we can do it We interactively work with them. It's webinar is interactive space. And we have for children, and we have 3D team and in space. And we have we create make a collective museum in virtual space along with my students from High School of Economics. We developed 3D scanning technology that may allow us to project the whole exhibition and make it with the creators globally, and full digitalization of a full-scale twin of the exhibition. It's not photo tour, but it's a full-scale laser scanning and digitalization of the full space of exhibition from to Matisse, when you can take a look of around every corner, and such digitalization. And if you view it in virtual reality mode, you can squat or you can jump, whichever you want. So turn into this kind of high-level digital copies gives thoughts to the future, and so we are thinking about digital accessibility and etiquette of digital digital exhibitions. It was impossible without the support of the companies that are investing in technological part, and the sponsors who support give financial support of this, and to make this digital records. So we cannot overestimate that ICOM is running with the museums, and IT services visit museums, and their colleagues with the Hermitage and from Museum of History, and also as a representative of huge companies like Panasonic, Sony, and tons of companies. There you can view all the companies involved, and also Microsoft and Google. And we had a great number of great research, and many museum workers talked about the competences, the digital competence, about what they are, what is in demand, what they need. So we considered all the competence demands and made a school of digital development museums. In Patanin, a charity foundation supported us, and 40 people have undergone this training, and so we expanded. So we are going to have 12 courses. You see the topics. Where to view them? You can say ICOM website, Excel School of Digital Development Museums. You can see all the partners. The biggest platform for creating online education. Some Panasonic, for part of the courses. A big Siberian company provides with the licenses, and we are shortly starting the courses of teaching all the colleagues, those who want to do this, to work in these areas of expertise and all these bases. And it would be impossible without enthusiasm and willingness of the management of the projects, without the work of this non-commercial organizations like ICOM and the Council of Museums, Association of Museums. Thanks a lot. It's so high tech that even it's a little bit scary. When people refuse to physically, many people start refusing to physically visit museums. If people do not like something, they're not going there. And the more they learn about it in virtual space, it's the more probability they'll go there. So we'll go to virtual visits. Sergey, can you share your successful cases? I forgot to make an announcement at the beginning. So we got a chat. We've got a QA session, so all the listeners can send their questions. You can see we are receiving some questions. At the end, we'll be able to allocate some time to give answers to the most urgent questions. So excuse me for stealing some of your time. We said that private museums cannot boast this kind of inclusion of their connections in online virtual reality. So I think Vladimir said about the museum, but it's a huge museum, and digital. This digital history should be based by the employees and the specialists. I think it will be the most modern museum in the future, like Pushkin Museum. So, speaking in terms of state-private museum partnerships, our foundation was created to popularize ICOM. That was forgotten at some time as an area of Russian art and ancient Russian art. It was forgotten at some time, and it lets the researchers to get involved and work in this area. And the people from Institute of Art Research, and we support the exhibition projects that took place and actually they held and are going to help in the future. And we want to actually carry on with this tradition that was founded by the founder of the museum, Mr. Ram. So we are, but the current situation corrected our plans. So actually we we deliver several projects every year. It's one big project, and we speak about the project of masterpiece of ancient Russian icon from regional museums. Now we've got a huge project dedicated to 400 years of Pravacum and of Avacum, and it took place in the 17th century. And a lot of parallels can be brought up, but all this takes place thanks to private partnership and private business. And so and private museums. So familiarization of the people with the beauty, with general public with the beauty. Naturally, many of our events we started running in online mode, and there was no other way. We have a lecture event that was very popular, and people would like to listen to the lecturer live. But now they run these lectures online, and we would like to thank everybody who let us create this kind of tool, and so we can share our experience in a fast way. But it was been mentioned, but we are made this way, and the museum community is made this way that it's hard to communicate with each other in digits. So we need personal communication. Like it's vital to go and see museums in person, exhibitions in person, and all this kind of things. I would like to thank our colleagues, Vladimir and other colleagues, for this kind of serious work for developing IT technology in the museum industry. And it's inevitable now. It's important to clarify to our colleagues who often are not very familiar with these technologies. Especially this some not very young keepers, museum keepers. But it's been implemented. This council will provide great help to root these kind of technologies, and what Vladimir spoke about tomorrow's event with unified rules. I think that museum community has been brought together now and been consolidated, and they show that they can help with generating state documents that we're working on in terms of museum registration and museum keeping, and working jointly. We enter new changes. We look at the shortcomings, and we can draw up a document with the participation of all the interested persons, all the stakeholders. I wasn't ready for this presentation, but I can reiterate that the Museum of the Russian Icon carries on working. The task that was set out by the founder of our museum, particularly popularization of general public with the Russian icon and the history of the Russian icon. Another interesting point. We're speaking about the visitors. The visitors have been changing in Russia, in Canada, and with Joost, in Finland. So more and more our people, our citizens, our compatriots, they come to museums. So before they didn't pay attention to it, now maybe because their shape of the visits has changed, and now they got interested in visiting museums. And it seems to me that there are some visitors who was just roaming around the shopping markets. Now he moved from the shopping center, from a shopping mall to the museum. And some museums, and the presence of museums in public networks and virtual museum tours, they also actually entice people to come to the museum, and actually helps us in our work. Thank you, Sergey. It's very interesting, very valuable consideration. We would like about a successful case to ask Joost. So he's got great experience, very various experience. So he's been working in the United States, in Holland, and Canada. Now he's going into China. And what's interesting is all museums has different kind of jurisdiction, private, municipal, state. So this wide spectrum is great value you could share. So please.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. I'm delighted about the dialogues and the discussions that we have had so far. It's, the whole idea of the museum being a meeting place, still being a meeting place, more virtually now and digitally now than ever before, maybe, but still bringing people together. Yes, well, I started my career in the United States at a private museum with only 2 trustees and 5 staff. And that basically provided us with all means. There was a lot of money involved there as well. All the means to do whatever it is that we wanted to do when it comes to expansion of collections, when it comes to reaching out to the various museums. Then I moved to Amsterdam to a national museum, a state museum, the National Maritime Museum in Amsterdam. And there the game was played in a different way. Although the collections were privately owned by an association, basically the membership of the museum, the employees were paid by the state, by the Dutch government. And the building was being provided by the Dutch government, and the Dutch government paid for the maintenance of the building. So you can't get closer to heaven, I guess, in that particular circumstance, although you still have to deal with the members who are the owners of the collection. But it certainly provides a lot of flexibility when it comes to working and reaching out to other state museums, for instance, provincial or municipal or private museums. Then I went to a municipal museum in Canada where the collections and the buildings were owned by the city and still are owned by the city of Vancouver, although the board hires the employees. And now I'm going to Hong Kong to a private museum that is partly paid for by the city of Hong Kong, but the collections are private. So there's a lot of mixed systems there that I guess I've experienced so far. But yeah, when it comes to legislation and rules and regulations, it's difficult to really address that particular topic, Anastasia. What I picked up from the dialogue here, and I believe Mikhail pointed that out in the beginning, that some of the private museums in Canada or in Hong Kong in China or in the Netherlands would like to collaborate with state museums or city museums or provincial museums and vice versa. But it's so important to that private museums, like public institutions, do comply with the rules and regulations that ICOM and other major institutions have installed and have developed. So I think maybe I should conclude it here. I think that for all different types of museums, it's so important to realize how trustworthy, how credible the partners are. I hear a lot of echo on the line here. And I think I hear the translator in Russian as well. But I hope I've been able to convey to you some of the things that you wanted to address in your question.
Yes, don't worry, everything was fine. Everything was clear.
Okay, good.
We have the record, so we'll be able to listen again to some crucial points. Thanks a lot that have shared your views. We've been deviated from our agenda a little bit. Maybe it's not a big problem because we've been reiterating the issue we wanted to finalize with about the issue of private museums outside Russia and position of museums and prospects of development idea of Institute of Private Museums. I've seen the outcome of a joint meeting of the Association of Museums, and we see the posted impossible unwilling to expand the number of institutions that call themselves museums. As an employee of a private museum, but I've been working for a long time for state museum. Now I see some kind of haughty, arrogant attitude of a state museum employees. When you listen, we hear that we work for private museums. So I'd like to talk to our colleagues how it's going to develop, what's the other prospects, whether the private museums turn into huge size state corporations were discussed before in the round table in a museum of architecture, whether it's developing into global collaboration because to implement big size project when now there's cultural values have been distributed to around the museums. We very often sometimes we need to stay hand in hand and do our joint work and involving not private companies sponsored but also private collection and private museums as well. So we would like to speak about this. So Mikhail Boris, please, if you want to add something and talk about this.
I can remind that Metropolitan Museum is a private museum, and there is a road from private collections governed by boards, etc., to fully fledged museums. And if we remove completely fake museums and non-museums, then we would be able to understand what private or what the private museum is, what the public museum is, and this track has been already established, and we need to get together and at the same time split and separate, not to have too many museums on the one hand, and separate the museums that are not acceptable. So I think that so we should and so we need to get together and forget what the private museums are, what the public museums are, and think about what the create associations. So I think we are on the right track, and it's good that we are discussing this in such a manner, and it would be good to run a few roundtables to also include delicate and painful experiences. So sometimes certain museums get sort of out of context, and certain things get from the real life to digital exhibits, and we are doing this together. And I think on the whole, tomorrow we need to discuss, to understand better certain things, and we have overall joint field of activities, and I think this should help us. And it may, and the problems will gradually reduce, recede, and problems we will be able to solve them and tackle them by joint efforts of the private and public institutions. And Simon Zhiltsov is listening to us today, who has become a newly formed head of the newly formed Private Museum Association. There are questions coming from him about certification and standardization of the museum activities, and I feel we need to select and realize the need for certain measures. I think we need to discuss it, and there are specific proposals. So Sergey, maybe on the part of the private museums, can say something, and I fully support the input by Professor Piotrovsky. All the museums and all the private collections from the start, they, for various reasons, are split between public and private ones, but we are serving the same cause, the museum activities, and what kind of administration or what kind of a form of ownership it is, it doesn't really matter. So I think we need to remind that museum is not a business. Museum is a museum business, and of course museums are included in the economy, the entertainment sector, and related to the earnings. To there are the founders sometimes earn on it, and mandatory functions by the state, and the participants, it is there, right? It is there. A breakthrough to collect items, and only by serving a cause can we do that. But when we are moving over to business, to money, it's already detaching, removing from the main cause, and all of us together, it will exist, always exist, always function. And thank you very much, Sergey. It's hard not to agree with you. And Konstantin, would you argue or would you agree with it? I would probably support the colleagues, and I think that I would also like to perhaps draw a conclusion from what has been said, because everybody is speaking about the same thing, more or less, and I would probably repeat myself by saying that we are serving the same museum cause, and this being involved with this topic and involved in the processes, we are on the way, and we are involved with it. And we will be able to cope with all the problems, to overcome all the difficulties. And what the means are, what kind of means we use, the three main qualities which are necessary for the successful partnership. Of course, there is also, because our latest question was funds and the means that we are asking about. During the most difficult pandemic years, there was a certain diversification or redistribution, and the participants to this investment, positive investment market, charitable foundations, there have been certain changes in that field, but the funds, it's superficial, and of course it's hard to operate without it, but it's of secondary importance. But being involved with things and the desire to move in the same direction by the participants, among other people, by the participants of this round table, it enables people to look into the future and look, and I think there is a success which is awaiting us in the future. So maybe one of the final issues, because we are pressed for time, maybe somebody would like to say something about the future, about the private museums, how it can function, how it can operate as an institution. So maybe you can go ahead and take floor. Do not hesitate. So maybe then, briefly, we will touch upon two issues. The question about the recording of the... Oh, Justus has raised the hand, so maybe we can let him speak.
Трибуна ваша.
Well, just very briefly, when it comes to the future of private museums, I think that's what you related to, Anastasia. I'm going to a private museum in Hong Kong, and one of the things I think I would like to share with all of you here is that the current situation not only enables me and hopefully others as well to be more savvy about technology, but also enables museums to organize courses together with universities via digital ways and venues. And what the museum in Hong Kong is doing, and I don't know of any initiatives in Russia, so please, or Finland, so please share this with me, is the Museum of Hong Kong and the Hong Kong Maritime Museum to organize a maritime history and curating course for secondary school students, so 15 to 17, and also a maritime history and museology course for university students. So whilst a pandemic is going on and a museum until this afternoon, tomorrow it will be reopened, the museum in Hong Kong, but whilst the pandemic is going on, we try to also create, I guess, in a sense, new generations of museum professionals, hopefully for better years, for years that we will be able to continue to sail full steam ahead with all the products and all the projects that we develop. And that's something that I wanted to share with you when it comes to the future. This might be something for all of us to keep in mind. The future is now. The new generations of museum professionals can be trained maybe more than ever before, because people are at home, students of university are at home, and they look for things to do next to the courses that they follow at university. So thank you, Anastasia. Thank you all for providing that time for me to relate to this and to allude to this. Thank you.
Это очень интересный действительно вот этот проект.
It's an interesting project, and Joost has actually mentioned it in more detail. And it's a project about curatorship, and it can work on any material and with any museum, and it has already attracted a huge number of people, and maybe it will help with the participation of the colleagues, and maybe it's worth trying. And I have a question. Maybe my colleague can support me about the interface between the Hermitage Museum and the private museum of a spoon in the city of Vladimir. So maybe people coming from Vladimir and private museums based, they actually studying this history of a spoon, and of course it's not a collection which can compare with expensive dishware stored by other and displayed by other museums, but it's actually quite a place which attracts many tourists, the historical old Russian city, and it's an important tourist hub. And this museum is telling this very interesting story, this very interesting attribute of our livelihood, and it has interface with many other museums, and it's actually an example for colleagues from private museums, which can help people to contact with each other and run exhibitions, etc. And of course, it's for some people maybe people from really grand high-level museums can have some sort of a condescending attitude to this, but anyway, but it's really a topical issue. But of course, it's an interesting topic. We have discussed it quite extensively with Simon Zhiltsov today, and we should probably discuss the issue of support measures and all possible kinds of cooperation. But it's probably a topic for a different round table, and it may go beyond the times. We may go beyond the time frame discussing it. So maybe signing memos and signing partnership agreements, we're actually very gratified to see that people are really very well disposed and we can help large museums and small museums and speak about this partner search, and maybe Sergey can say something about this issue and add some considerations that he may have. Of course, after such distinguished speakers as Professor Piotrovsky, it's hard to say something of value, but for people who are visiting the museums, it doesn't matter whether they are looking at objects which belong to private individuals or to public institutions. And the main thing is to be able to see them and to use them. And of course, it's not the most topical issue. And then finally, it's important for the people we are working with. So it probably is important that the public governance is beyond, is an issue which is beyond the competences of the museum. And of course, the task is, it's a task which is being faced more by the museum community to sort of formulate our viewpoint and the considerations that we need in order to simplify our relations. And issuing from our expertise, our experience of working, it is the most important thing is to have cooperation, and the main thing is to cooperate between the owners and management of the public museums to make this cooperation interesting for all, and it's very interesting topic, and this is something that this is how we can probably draw the conclusion. And finally, maybe we can let our Helsinki colleague speak, Mr. Kartio. Maybe he can say something.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting discussion. I think it was very important that we took up the ICOM guidelines, the definition of what is really a museum, which is really a common thing for both private and public museums. With this big international upswing for museums, there are lots of interest in museums. There are, of course, all these businesses that call themselves museums, but don't really meet the criteria. But when it then comes to the real museums, there is one thing that we haven't talked about perhaps so much, and it is the corporate partnerships, which are so important for all of us. And there, I think both the state and municipal museums, and then private museums, which are still non-profit institutions, they are very much in the same position versus their corporate partners. And we have been very happy with our corporate partnerships. They have enabled us to do things that would not otherwise have been possible, especially in the digital area and with virtual things and this kind of technological advances. So I think this is one of the most important parts of public-private collaborations. And here I would in a way count the private non-profit museum still as a part of the public realm.
Спасибо большое, Кай.
Thank you very much, Kai.
Коллеги, давайте все-таки ответим на вопрос, который уже 3 раза, по-моему, попыталась задать.
So
Не чувствовала себя определенно.
there is a question that I tried to answer for 3 times. People are asking our competent opinion. The roundtable participants are asking for our competent opinion. How the number of live visitors to museums will change as the digital technologies are developing and increasing.
Maybe someone has been collecting some statistic data when the museums were working full scale. What's your viewpoint? What do you know about it?
Можно я отвечу, только не отвечу.
Okay, answer this. But instead of answering, I think it's a wrong question. We don't need to think about more or less people. We don't need to think about the quality, the impression of quality of the impression of the people in the museum. We'd like to also to say very important for those, actually for founders of the museums. Museums can bring profit. Can bring profit. They can be self-sufficient, but you cannot make it as a museum purpose. It's the same goes with the number of people. You need to speak about the number of the quality and about the missions. The museums, different ways should deliver pleasure, and via this pleasure to people, to teach them, to educate them, and expand their view over the world and over the life. And actually, these things can be hardly actually calculated by the number. I mean, arithmetics won't do here. More or less, it's hard to tell. So the digital culture, it's about arithmetics, well, algebra. If we do not only arithmetics, then it will help us to go about all these issues and bring us to very interesting solutions for private and other museums. Answered it. Thank you. I don't want to speak about it. I would like to carry on with the idea of Mikhail Boris. Everything is very right. If I remember, 885 people can stay at the same time in the state Hermitage. I think this is the limit. I think so, and there is some limit for every museum. So started before any display blockbusters, as they call them. So the important displays dedicated to European artists. They had some. They were sold the tickets as an elite event. It was an elite kind of leisure. It was only for a certain time. You couldn't just rush there, buy a ticket, and you had some time, a fixed visit. And so maybe it'll increase the flow, the flux of the visitors. And so it led to redistribute the number of people around the museums, to the Hermitage, to the Russian museum, to private museum, flat museum. And we need to jointly discuss this. It's to come to terms and agree with the tourist business, because here we are related to this with tourist empires running, and museums are linked to this, especially in big size cities. In Hong Kong, I think, and is also this is a big issue of a great number of people visiting museums. I think this is the outcome and the solution for the nearest times. You shouldn't say that just. I think colleagues will agree with me. It's a number of presence of Internet Space Museum. Lets a great number of people to visit it, and many people can visit museum them. And just have a short analysis and brief analysis shows this. Maybe it's a very modest share of 3 million visits, but we need to understand that virtual visit is no way a replacement for a personal visit of a museum. But it's an additional tool. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sergey Evgenievich.
Россия пропала.
Коллеги, здравствуйте. Анастасия, к сожалению.
So our moderator has disappeared. So there are some technical issues in the Zoom. Not normal, but in general, I think, colleagues, we have started. We are actually breaking our time frame, and the issues, the points we've managed to discuss, I think give us idea that we've managed to come up with a lot of ideas and solutions. I want to thank everybody who come to join us in. Mikhail Boris, thanks a lot for your joining in and support us. Our foreign, our international colleagues visited us, and our Russian colleagues. Thanks a lot for joining in. It's great pleasure that our round table turned out to be not just limited by the questions and by the points that we've prepared initially, but it got broadened. And we've touched upon a lot of issues like how digitalization should be considered as what, as a trial and tribulation, or look at our mission and consider ourselves, view ourselves in this space. So the main point is that quality is the priority. Mikhail Boris was absolutely right saying that our goal is quality, not to count the numbers, not to count the number of people, not to count the money, but to address the institutions that are available, the colleagues with actually success cases that will help and coordinate how to search for investors and maybe advise those who can allocate some target solutions, and maybe it's a private institution on the state institution with private collections, and I felt myself that we are in the same boat, we're on the same page, and just entering this Zoom roundtable, this community, I felt whether I'm on the pier or whether I'm entering this boat, I'm entering this vessel with the managers of the state museums, of the big size institutions, and as the outcomes, the result, I can see that we have common issues, we've come the same problems and the same points, and to resolve them, it's felt that we can actually ask for a shoulder and for the hand lending and help, and our collaboration with the Institute of the Museum of the History of Russia is a good case that shows that the projects that are launched can be a success and good prospect for the future. Thanks a lot for our colleagues. If anybody wants to add something, I understand that Anastasia is unable to join us in. Oh no, she joined. She's back again, I think. So, colleagues, who wants to add something? So come up, colleagues. I was dropped out. I'm sorry, but I understand that we are successfully coming to the final stage. Well, I took the floor voluntarily. So, but I started rounding up our wonderful round table. But you can see, it looks like Mikhail Boris and Joost raised his hand, wants to voice. We can refuse. You can refuse neither Mikhail Boris. No, yes, no. No, everything I've said. Everything is. I just touched accidentally. Thanks for intellectual pleasure of meeting you, colleagues. And if not this advantage of the digital means, we wouldn't be able to have this kind of round table. It's a very fast communication vehicle. Yes, thanks for this meeting. It was a great pleasure. I hope to meet you at Baltic Cultural Meeting in St. Petersburg and also Moscow. I think everything will return into the normal state. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your hospitality, for providing a platform for me to meet wonderful colleagues. I wish you all the very best with your institutions, and never be reluctant, never hesitate to connect with the Hong Kong Maritime Museum and see how we can collaborate internationally. Thank you so much.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо всем, кто сегодня собрались. Особо хотелось бы поблагодарить.
Thanks for everybody. So I would like to thank the glorious ProArt team who provided the technical support of our event and hosted our interpreters. Without them, I think I would have failed to arrange this conference within a week, but we started arranging it before the last week. So thank to everybody who's with us this afternoon and evening. I think this roundtable will enable the further partnership and further meetings. Thanks a lot to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening to everybody.
Good evening.